Is being woke good or bad?
Bad. Lol. Yeah, no, bad. I will elaborate. Sorry, I don't know. I can't just turn away from you guys. It feels almost rude. Yes, hello. I will hereby elaborate on my previous answer. This is Dark Matter 2525. He's a relic from the days when criticizing Christianity was cool. I'm a relic from the days when criticizing feminism was cool. Where are we now? What do we do now? We don't know, but it's definitely cool. Roll the tape.
Well, it depends greatly on what you mean by woke. Now, I've scoured the internet for a consistent definition of woke.
You asked your Twitter followers what it means to them. Not exactly a diverse range of recipients. My mistake, is that blue sky? Okay, do you think that's more diverse or less, politically speaking? Either way, like whistling into the reverberation chamber of your hug box and claiming you've scoured the internet is kind of, well, not woke per se, but it's a characteristic that often accompanies it. Intellectual laziness, as is duplicitous doublethink. Even the first two responses, you can see the issue. First comment is the state of being alert to explicit and systemic biases. Second comment is a nonsensical word the far right use as an umbrella term that just means anything I don't like. And it's like that all the way down. It just keeps oscillating between these mutual contradictions. We don't use that word. ... We do use that word and it's a good thing. And none of them are arguing amongst themselves. They're patting each other on the back as they contradict each other. They don't care. They don't bother examining any of these things. They just reiterate 1,000 permutations of left good, right bad as they casually huff each other's farts. Now, you might say that's what woke is in a nutshell, but in an even smaller nutshell, it just means oikophobic. Having an irrational fear and hatred of the familiar. I've already lost you, I know. You might be passively listening to me right now, but you will ignore what I just said. You will forget that there is even such a thing as oikophobia, so you can go back to normalizing it by euphemizing it. That's something for the rest of you to think about, those of you with a functioning, conscience.
First definition in Webster's dictionary, which is, quote, aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice.
Social justice is also a euphemism for oikophobia. And Webster's dictionary is a captured institution. You know that, right? You might as well be reading from an instruction manual for a Corby trouser press. But that didn't mean anything, Mike. Shut up.
While right-leaning people tend toward the second definition, quote, politically liberal or progressive, as in matters of racial and social justice, especially in a way that is considered unreasonable or extreme, unquote.
Left-leaning people favor it. Right-leaning people do not favor it. Merely by making this observation, you've hit the nail closer to the head than Webster's dictionary has. If by definition the left wing thinks it's a good thing and the right wing thinks it's a bad thing, then what that thing is surely left wing in nature. I mean, by definition. And yes, oikophobia is left wing. It's left wing extremism, just like how xenophobia is right wing extremism. It's remarkably simple once you break the spell of the newspeak and you allow yourself to understand English, classical or simplified.
Now, it originally meant the first definition, but throughout recent political discourse, the term was co-opted and turned into the second definition in order to disparage.
No, it originally meant not asleep, but physically not asleep. Then it was used as a euphemism for something else, and then it was used as an insult for that self-same something else. It's a similar trajectory to the word gay. It meant happy, and then it was adopted as a euphemism for homosexual, and now it's every middle schooler's favorite playground insult. Euphemisms have this nasty habit of backfiring like that. Again, you're better off just calling things what they are.
Throughout most of my search, I found that people using it to disparage varied greatly in how they tried to define it. They weren't very consistent.
Yes, the poor dears don't even know the word oikophobia, never mind the concept. And even if you introduce them to it, they'll still keep stumbling over all these euphemisms. This is a very powerful spell. It places a linguistic blind spot over a particular concept. And it's difficult to tell when you've got a blind spot because you're blind to it.
Some had difficulty defining it at all.
Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that
Indeed, it's a sad thing to watch. It's like watching a wokeoid trying to define woman. They just melt into a chamber pot of circular definitions. A woman is whatever someone who identifies as a woman says is a woman, or whatever. You could stand there yelling, adult female human. It means adult female human, but they can't see it. There's just this floating aperture of static noise where the concept of adult female human used to be. And that's just a more advanced stage of the same condition this young lady has. She doesn't know what oikophobia is because no one has ever mentioned it. For her entire life, it's just been, there is only xenophobia. Xenophobia is all around us, everywhere, and it has no opposite. It's a similar thing with misandry. Most people have never heard of it. They've been taught that misogyny is everywhere and it has no opposite. And if you ask them to define what a man is, they'll list off a bunch of duties and responsibilities and necessary sacrifices, like doing hard labor and getting punched in the face, that sort of thing. They don't know what an adult male human is either. Women are what we say they are, and men must do what we tell them to do. The end. That's all they're able to ascertain through their ideologically impoverished vocabulary. And it's not just the proverbial extreme left. It's the majority of people have been verbally and psychologically tricked into hating their own men, and indeed owning their own men.
Some defined it as assigning viewpoints to entire groups.
It's a basis for madness. When people say the gay community, who are you talking about? It's like, women think this. Oh, really? 50% of the species all agree on something.
Yeah, he's not defining it except by, second order. Collectivism is not strictly what woke means. It's just a typical characteristic of those who are woke, like the intellectual laziness and the duplicitous doublethink. It's basically the extreme left wing we're talking about. Douglas isn't describing the left part of it, he's describing the extreme part of it, the excessive, dogmatic collectivism. It's just as sinister from the left as it is from the right. But you're right, people do get hung up on these second-order descriptions. Ask someone, what does right-wing mean? And you'll see if you get a description of the extremities of the extreme right. They'll probably say fascist at some point. Ask them what that means and watch the clockwork grind to a halt.
And some defined it as the perfect opposite, being restricted from assigning viewpoints to entire groups.
What is the definition of woke? Well, the definition of woke, as I mentioned in the book, is the making sacred of historically marginalized race, gender, and sexual identity groups. That's it.
Still too wordy. I just, I feel you, man, having to wade through all this needless garrulousness. It's like reading lefty memes. And yes, I'm aware of the irony, because this is probably going to be an hour long, but this isn't me trying to define things. I'm simply lecturing you pompously, okay? And, he's making an all too common mistake. Woke does not make anything sacred, it only demonizes. It does not build one side up, it only pushes the other side down, and thereby pushes everything down. It's not a misguided form of love with its heart in the right place. Right? It's not excessive empathy that has malfunctioned in some way. No, it's targeted bigotry doing exactly what it is supposed to do. It's not xenophilia. It is the opposite of xeno and the opposite of philia. You've probably already forgotten.
He talks about historically marginalized groups, such as gender, race, and sexual orientation, as being sacred. In other words, unassailable.
And other groups as very much assailable.
But here's my question. What legitimate criticism or negative statement can be levied at an entire race or an entire gender or an entire sexual orientation?
The preferential treatment. That lopsided two-tier justice system thing.
Now, if someone said, quote, the problem with black people is ABC, or the problem with women is XYZ.
They stand to benefit from DEI hiring policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring policies, and scholarships, and government handouts. I didn't draw that line. I didn't hand out these privileges. I'm just pointing them out. I'm not the one assigning jobs and assigning educations based on people's skin color or genitals or what they do with their genitals. That whole shtick is another one of those characteristics associated with woke.
How do you correct immutable characteristics? Genocide? Eugenics? What?
Woo, lad, slow down there. Okay, what I'm saying is, right, I'm not a fan of wealth redistribution. Yes, especially along the lines of immutable characteristics. I would like to turn down the identitarian communism, okay? I would like governments to stop stealing from us and spaffing everything up the wall while they pretend to kiss the pampered asses of anyone foreign or feminine. That does not mean that I want genocide or eugenics, just to be clear. It is possible to be not in favor of gay race communism and also not in favor of genocide. Did you know that? There's some middle ground here. All right? Glad to be of service.
So, yes, we have decided as a society to not discriminate based on certain demographics like race, gender, and sexual orientation. Isn't that a good thing? Calling that sacred does not excuse bigotry, does it?
Yeah, you're essentially doing the same thing that guy's doing. You're ignoring the target of the bias and only seeing the relative benefactor. Sacred? Surely everyone's life is sacred. Surely everyone's demographic identity is sacred. That's the way it's supposed to be. Yes, that's what many people believe, by default, no less. I'm glad you can indicate that you believe it too. Okay, well, listen to me closely. Woke is when your own countrymen are not sacred. When their lives are not sacred. It's when your own countrymen are second-class citizens to everyone else. I look forward to hearing your explanation as to why you stopped being anti-that.
Years ago, people would have described me as anti-woke because I openly expressed dislike of what some people would associate with wokeness today.
The associations that's the area around the blind spot. That's why it's all you can see. Focus on the actual descriptive definition. I know you can't. It's exactly where the blind spot is, but please try. Humor me.
But my dislike was rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding. It took me too long to realize this, but my dislike was not for a specific group of people, which is the same mistake that right-leaning people are making now.
Follow my finger. Follow my finger. Follow my finger, yeah? It's not just right-wing people who make mistakes. I've lost you, haven't I?
My dislike was for a specific set of traits that anybody of any group could possess. It's just that sometimes people are willing to overlook these traits if they're held by people of their own group. Typical tribalism.
Okay. And what's the opposite of that? What's the opposite of in-group preference? Christ, you can't even hear me, can you? It's an auditory blind spot as well. All you hear is a noise, like Peanuts Bears. Right wing, mistakes, Christ. That's all you're getting, isn't it?
These are the traits: obsessive, easily offended, hypocritical, and lacking self-awareness.
I'm going to timestamp this for future reference. 5:20, all right. I might even use it for the thumbnail. Thank you.
Now, these are often a package deal. I associated those traits with certain groups.
Okay, I just realized this is a 55-minute video I'm responding to, and if it's taken this long to get through 5 minutes of it, I'm going to have to start making skips. Long ones, I hope you understand. It's just as well because you're mostly making increasingly eccentric orbits around the same aforementioned blind spot.
But the right-wing media sphere is a juggernaut that searches for, outright invents, or focuses upon the most extreme, legit or not, and then elevates that, puts a spotlight on it as the norm.
Yes, I did look ahead in his video. He does not illustrate the other juggernaut heading in the other direction. The one going left. I know this all looks like two gatekeepers keeping one another's gates, and maybe that's all it is. Maybe the left wing is just reacting to the right wing. Maybe the right wing's just reacting to the left wing. Maybe a bit of both all the time. I mean, it's a silly metaphor about wings, after all. Things that humans so famously don't have. So the very least you can do is present this dichotomy without prejudice. Prejudice towards one wing or the other. Where surely you would need both. I mean, I'm not a wing expert. I'm not a terrorist. But I'm pretty sure you can't fly with one wing. You can't even fly if one wing is significantly weaker than the other. So this is and always has been a crappy metaphor. We are human beings. We have arms. One is usually more dexterous than the other, and it's usually the dexter, aka the right. My metaphor has wordplay in it. I win. Whatever they may have meant before, what right wing and left wing mean in modern parlance is basically in-group preference and out-group preference, respectively. Right wing is in-group, left wing is out-group. Sorry if this sounds ominously Darwinian of me, but I think in-group preference is more important than out-group preference. I think that neither necessarily precludes the other, but I think it necessarily has to start with in-group preference and then maintain itself. Just like how everything grows from the inside out. So I can't be dealing with this transparently partisan nonsense where the right wing is so constantly wrong about this thing that the left wing is... Wait, what left wing? I don't see any left wing. I'm a big brain centrist. All I see is a hole in the sky. Sorry, we're only 6 minutes in. All I skipped was 18 seconds there. Sorry, I'll try hard. This is why I normally get so drunk. I'm needlessly fastidious when I'm sober, but let's go.
So people end up with a lopsided view of reality. And if you don't agree with them, then you are called a cuck, a simp, a beta, soy boy, and any one of a million other emasculating terms that works very well on insecure young men.
We get it. Men are the problem. Good one. This is what young men hear from every avenue of their upbringing. So they lash out by calling you a cuck or a simp or a soy boy. Those insults, incidentally, those name calls, will not earn you a degree at a prestigious university, unlike the approved left-wing equivalents, i.e. toxic masculinity, white fragility, etc. Sorry, I should actually take a big old drink and let's actually skip some.
Hate nobody, or those you hate will shape you into what you will be.
anyone can say, I hate nobody. And you can't necessarily prove them wrong, whatever they may or may not even admit. Hate is an almost entirely subjective term, like strange or funny, or indeed love. You can say or do anything at all, and it might not seem hateful to you. I don't hate these people, I just happen to frame them as the bad guys every time. What? I don't even do that, they do that. And that guy pointing out that I'm doing that, it's actually him who's doing that. Honestly, man, this shit gives me flashbacks. The recursive thoughts, you know what I mean? Anyway, big drink.
Not everything that is claimed to be good really, truthfully, is good.
Correct. And not everything that is claimed to be hate really, truthfully, is hate. I know it might seem like xenophobia, but maybe it's not xenophobia. It might just be a criticism of oikophobia. Okay, good. We might not be on the same page or even the same chapter, but at least we're distantly related in the same language.
And that was the real problem I had with my feminist relative and many of the religious people I argued with over the years. It wasn't their feminism, and it wasn't their religion. It was their specific behavior for which they alone are responsible.
Yes, everyone takes exception to behavior, but this is a question of when you apply selective double standards around that behavior based on immutable characteristics. When these double standards are oikophobic, that's what we call woke. I'm skipping most of you now, but I'm able to summarize.
It was popular to make fun of SJWs. I was essentially on the vanguard against wokeism back then.
No, you were not. You were still very much on the anti-Christianity bandwagon. That was never anti-woke. Unlie, please.
I made a cartoon that was doing great numbers and going viral. It was called If God Became an SJW. Now, when I realized the truth of what was really going on, I put that video on private so that it would not be seen anymore.
The truth of what was really going on. Way to load a premise, my dude. Welcome to Act 2, everyone. What was really going on? Okay, let's have an interval. I'm afraid I can't show you Dark Matter's cartoon about what if God was... So, here's mine. One I did almost exactly 11 years ago on that very same subject.
Oh! Okay, that's... You've... Okay. For a second there I thought you were going to take my heart, but that's fine, that's just a rib, I got loads of those. Hi, my name's Adam. I don't know, but it's got my ribs.
What? You did this! You!
What is all this kerfuffle? What's going on?
That's his rib!
Is that your rib? Well, yes, but it's just...
Well, do something about it then!
All right, I'll pick it up, I guess.
Don't you touch it! Mine!
Hey, no fighting!
He does this all the time!
I bet he does.
We've only just met.
Silence! Toil this field until I think of a way to punish you.
I got it on me! This is so hard!
Oh, I meant to ask, how does one actually toil something?
I said toil! What on earth is that you're wearing?
Leaf bag! So he don't put no more of his ribs in me no more!
You scoundrel! Why would you make her wear this?
I did you not just hear what she said?
Silence!
I don't feel like wearing nothing no more!
Why must you make her wear this? Cad! My God, man! Your shame is showing! Pervert!
All right! I quite like the idea of the leaf bag, actually.
Should I leave a link for anyone who's new here? There's nobody new here. Like, algorithm, be like algorithm do. There's nobody new here. So, all right, anyway, this is me still not censoring my own work, even though it is kind of laughably terrible even by 11-year-old standards. You, Mr. 25, chose instead to indeed censor your own work. And not because it was pish poor, but because it was politically unacceptable. Someone said it was hate, right? I cannot wait to hear this, but I'm gonna have to wait. In general, because the world's going by a bit slower now because I'm drunk. Go on, tell us the truth of what was really going on.
I've even been accused of being woke now, which is very funny to me. So what changed?
You took down the anti-woke videos, and now you're telling us, quote, why I stopped being anti-woke, end quote.
See, a lot of people disliked SJWs for the same reason that I disliked religion, because we generalized the people in those groups based on the more extreme ones who seemed very obsessive, very hypocritical, lacked self-awareness, and were easily offended.
Well, see, I never had a problem with lefties, just the extremists. We call them woke. Just like I never had a problem with religious people, just the extremists. We call them Muslims. You call them Christians. We are not the same.
And nobody likes walking on eggshells. Nobody liked their language being policed, like blasphemy, or to be lectured, like sermons, or to be accused of certain things just on the basis of immutable characteristics, born into sin.
Yes, there's this temptation to compare the woke with the religious, almost as though that represents the left and the right. But it's really not the case. Religion spans across all the political spectrum in all kinds of ways, whereas the entity we call woke is just a big wet splodge on the left of it. Like God left his coffee cup after wiping his ass with his left hand. Religion has its forms of extremism, but religion itself is not extremist. But wokeism, by definition, is extremism, oikophobic extremism. Like, I'm no fan of organized religion, but I'm able to have spirited debates with its adherents. Polite, respectful spiritual debates. Certainly not always, but sometimes. I have never, despite all my efforts on this channel, been able to conduct such an honest conversation with a wokeoid. But maybe that's because I prescriptively sort of prescribe woke as extremism. Yeah, all right, good point, accurate. So maybe we should just do away with the euphemisms, yeah? I can't compromise with extremists because they're extremists. Because of their extremeness. It's just too radical for me. To the max.
Like being a man or being white or straight, etc. To anti-SJWs, that seemed to be ironically racist and sexist. That fed into my belief that they were hypocritical and lacked self-awareness.
Well, I was going to say, it's not irony, it's hypocrisy, and it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Women are better than men, non-white people are better than white people, and because we believe that, we're better than you. And it's not just, a lack of self-awareness, it's straight up deception. They know they're lying, but they're allowed to lie to you because they are above you in the hierarchy. They just don't call it lying when they do it. Call it fortification or fucking ever. So they lie all the time. Just because they can. They will say black is white just for a goof. They will say a man is a woman. And they will force you to submit to the lie just to humiliate you. The only reason anyone thinks this is okay is because they've never known anything else. They have lived with this rot for their whole lives, so they think it's normal. This is a problem, D. Do you see? Before we get into this ensuing section, let us remind ourselves of what we're talking about without the silly euphemisms like woke. There are millions of raging oikophobes all over the country. They are actively hostile against nationalism, against private property, against the family unit, against borders, of any kind, really, and of course, men's rights. They want these things abolished, and they are well on their way to getting it. They've long slow marched their way through the institutions, and now they run the schools, and they run the media, they run the legal system, and they run the government. They have filled at least 4 generations of heads with this dogmatic notion that men are evil, especially white men. They believe this to their very core, that they have found the bad guys this time, the exact demographic of humans on whom everyone can blame all their problems. And it's straight, cisgendered, North European males. And they will scorch the earth to get rid of us, while they profess to be saving it from us. That's the long and the short of it. There is a bloody great Leviathan actively destroying our civilization. Yeah, a titanic goddamn lizard just tearing through the infrastructure, deliberately, maliciously. Now, some people don't like this. We don't like that this is happening, and we would like it to unhappen. We look up every day and we see Cthulhu destroying the city, and we find it concerning. We want Cthulhu to die, or maybe just go away, just stop destroying the city, that sort of thing. Bear this in mind, moving forward. and if you're moving backwards, bear it in mind too.
Seeking offense is how I perceived critical analysis by SJWs anyway. And I think other people perceived that as well. So it became a game to be offensive to them, to get their attention and then laugh at them for it.
See, that's not how I saw it. I saw Cthulhu marching towards us over the horizon, and I called out, "Beware, Cthulhu!" And no one listened, and no one cared. So I wrote jokes about it. I wrote funny songs about it, hoping maybe people would listen to those. And it did help. A little. But for me, it was never about the jokes. It was about Cthulhu, warning people about the Dark Lord and his encroaching reign of terror.
Because the SJWs were always complaining about racism and sexism, a lot of people realized that making racist and sexist jokes was a great way to trigger them.
Everything is sexist and racist to this creature. Literally everything. So I don't know what you mean by racist and sexist jokes. It can mean literally any joke. Could you give us an example? Why not? You would not risk summoning Cthulhu. Well, Cthulhu is upon you, whether you would risk it or not.
People constantly made fun of how weak and thin-skinned the SJWs were. Snowflakes, they were constantly called. It turned into a cottage industry.
Yes, it soon became apparent that one man alone cannot fight Cthulhu. So a few of us got together and built a cottage. Or two. I don't know. I'm gathering by your tone that you feel that was too far. You think it was a bit much. Making it to level 1 in the Civ game where we get some grass huts and some sticks. That's you think that's a tad overboard when dealing with a marauding Cthulhu. Okay, well you're entitled to your opinion. What is it you do again? Oh yeah, you're fighting a different god. Fair enough.
The people advocating for SJW causes were essentially funding their own opposition.
Anyone who pays taxes is funding their own opposition. Especially when the government is giving all that money to Cthulhu!
The cameras turned to college campuses, where there were plenty of young people who were excited about fighting back against racism and sexism.
Yeah, no, it's not passionate, excited young people we're talking about. Nor is it a bunch of overworked and underpaid nurses and teachers, or any other saccharine picture of human innocence you can lazily paint. What we're dealing with is not even made of people. It's made of memes. multiple generations of mutated oikophobic memes turning us against each other as countries and as communities and as families. So if you're going to describe that shit as a bunch of fresh-faced fucking cherubims sitting around on clouds and playing harps, then I'm going to take this moment to remind you that it is in fact Cthulhu. That's why we call it woke. Because he has risen. The sleeping one has now awoken.
And because they were young, maybe they weren't the best at expressing themselves, and maybe they did not realize that their own emotion and passion was the lifeblood of the comedic skits that would use them as punchlines. I have no doubt that entire mortgages have been paid off just from making fun of college kids. And so the anti-SJW movement grew into a juggernaut.
Did it? Do we have our very own Titanic monster now? It's a Godzilla. It's Godzilla, isn't it? It's one of those movies where Godzilla comes to save us from a different monster. Well, all right, that was quick. A second ago, we just had some cottages, but whatever. We've got a Godzilla now. I'm very glad we have a Godzilla fighting on our side against Cthulhu. Because to remind you, if the slumbering one wins this fight, our civilization is gone. It's ashes. So yes, I'm delighted to hear that we have what you call a juggernaut, because what we're fighting is not what you illustrate as a bunch of children in gingham dresses frolicking through a field of daisies. It is the great sleeper of relief!
Starting out as just purely a comedic response, trolling and mocking, but then gradually morphed into something very serious and political, an actual movement.
An actual movement? Well, like that. What the fuck is an actual movement?
The unserious, racist, and sexist jokes morphed into sincerely held beliefs and political stances.
Okay, then it was always a movement. We didn't just laugh at some jokes and then figure out the premise of the joke. The premise was there first, as is traditional and possible. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to be laughing about. Contrary to popular belief, right, we are not backwards bizarro people from the mirror dimension where effects precede causes. And you are not a bunch of naked babies with angel wings, all right? So yes, the movement came first. The premise came first. The premise being, look, Cthulhu just burned down another church. Third one this week. Remember Cthulhu? Anyone? I mention it every day. No? Okay. Oh, well, gallows humor it is. Wouldn't it be funny if Cthulhu burned down another church? Ha ha ha, yeah, that's hilarious. That would never happen.
And I noticed that those who spoke out against the obsessive were becoming quite obsessive themselves. You are what you hate.
Cthulhu is obsessed with destroying the world. Godzilla is obsessed with defending that world from Cthulhu. Yes, they are both obsessed. Yes, they're both easily offended. Yes, they're both monsters, mate. But one of them is trying to destroy us, and the other one is trying to defend us. Is this... Am I getting through yet? Do you see the important difference there? Or are you just going to continue calling Godzilla a hypocrite for having the same weird rubber costume as Cthulhu? Narrator's voice, yes, that's exactly what he's going to do.
Donald Trump was very much a centerpiece of that backlash. He came up during a very unique moment of the political history of the United States. Conventional wisdom regarding political correctness went right out the window.
It's not political correctness. Okay? We're not doing the euphemisms here. It's not progress. It's not social justice. It's not woke. It is Cthulhu! Timestamp 2525. Is that your project? It's 2025 when you expect to have turned the whole world into dark matter. Spoken like a true, well, like Cthulhu.
The stage at that time was set in such a way that a lot of people didn't care how offensive Trump was. They were tired of the offense takers and even wanted him to be as offensive as possible, just as a fuck you.
That is you calling him offensive. Subjective. None of this is offensive unless you're offended by it. And believe it or not, putting America first is not necessarily offensive. Like, to at least quite a lot of Americans. Like, you keep doing this. You're portraying one side as some innocent kids fighting against sexism and racism, and the other side as a bunch of jokers being offensive. Your propaganda could not be any more obvious and lazy and cheap. And so I'm satirizing it. Not to offend you, you must understand. I'm once again simply warning everyone about Cthulhu.
See, now it wasn't a movement about just merely getting offended about something they happened to see or hear. It was a movement that actively sought out offense to point at, like they actively desired to be offended.
We are not offended by Cthulhu. Our cities are getting ransacked by Cthulhu. Do you understand? We don't need to dick about with farty nebulous concepts like offense. We are actually getting attacked by a creature that wants us extinct.
No longer was it a movement about laughing at anger, it was a movement about getting angry. Suddenly the rule that inspired "you mad, brah" no longer applied. The rules changed when the offense changed. Now the winner was whoever could get the most angry.
No, the rule was to defeat Cthulhu. Or to divert him or distract him. Do something about the great old one. 10 years ago, there weren't very many of us, because Cthulhu was only just within binocular distance. But now he is within plain sight. He's part of the skyline as he raises it to the ground. So now quite a lot of people have noticed. And they don't know what's going on. Some of them are very afraid. Some of them get very sad. And yes, some of them get very angry. Personally, I think these are understandable reactions and suitable expressions in regard to your home getting destroyed by a monster. We're just ordinary people. We're just innocent men. Being terrorized by a monster. And in reaction to that, we have emotions individually, like and situationally. We don't get together and go, last week we were being offensive, this week we're being angry. Hop to it, chat. Like some kind of fucking committee for the liberation and integration of terrifying organisms and their rehabilitation into society. Yeah, no. Believe it or not, we have emotions normally, like human beings. We're not alien robots who've been programmed in chapters to oppose Cthulhu. It's actually opposing Cthulhu is a normal thing for a human to do. But yeah, I suppose submitting to Cthulhu and joining him in his massacre against your own countrymen. It's not an entirely abnormal thing to do. Nobody's perfect, but yeah, that's a hard line. That's why we don't see eye to eye. It's why we're angry. It's why we're obsessive. Because of the whole apocalypse thing.
But that was still a double standard. If the other side got angry, it was still funny and mocked. But if your side got angry, it was based and applauded.
Their side is sexualizing children and mutilating their genitals. Their side is flooding our country with criminals and making us pay for it. Their side is arresting our side, foretelling the truth. I try not to be hypocritical, I try not to be driven by emotions, but there are many people involved in this resistance, and it's of little interest to me that some of them are occasionally a tad irrational in their attempts to defend their civilization from certain doom. This is the big picture. Everything we know and love is getting leveled by a monster. This is not some petty tribal warfare between two small tribes. This is a colossal globalist demon eating its way through all the tribes. This is not tit for tat. It's just tat. This is not 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It's just 12 trying not to be dragged into nothingness by the forces of zero. You are perfectly free to pretend this is not happening, to forget that this is happening, but I will not pretend. I will remember. I will not forget. Unless you can actually drink these things straight out your brain, in which case I might well forget.
Consider this woman. You've all seen this image. This is the face of 1 billion thumbnails, still used on uploads and memes to this day.
Memes become popular when they strike a chord. Faces strike a chord when there's a combination of fashion and expression that looks eerily familiar. A lot of people see that picture and think, I've met that woman. Not that exact woman, but good Lord, I've met several of her. You know what I mean? We see a face like that and we can imagine her saying something hysterically absurd. Let's have a listen.
I got a story. My fucking parents are immigrants. No, not even a fucking big percentage. Tiny.
How many women in the U.S.
get raped? Do you know how many?
1 in every 3 women.
Well, would you look at that? She had indeed just got done saying something hysterically absurd. It is not 1 in 3 women who has been raped. Not even close. Not anywhere in the world. It is an absolute lie. The purpose of this lie is to make women terrified of men. Yeah, and to make men feel guilty about women. It is to tear people apart at the most granular level, the level of men and women. That right there is oikophobia, rampaging through our culture in plain sight. Hey, half of you be terrified of the other half. Go. All right, that seems normal. That's Cthulhu. Madulu. That's the great dreamer. You don't see him coming because he comes from inside. Everything grows from the inside out, but everything dies from the inside out.
What's especially funny about this meme is that the source material originally came from the Alex Jones channel, and we all know how calm and collected Alex Jones is.
Yeah, some people think the hacker is cringe, but it works for the Maori. The point is, if you are telling the truth, and it seems like nobody's listening, your emotional state is an understandable reaction. But if you're lying and getting away with it, your emotional state is, if anything, it's an accessory to the deception. It's probably just another part of the lie. At this point, we're skipping long sections of your video where you just go on and on about the truth tellers being worse than the liars because they're mean.
I self-censor more when I talk to someone I consider anti-woke than someone I consider woke. I have to eliminate entire words from my vocabulary, like cis, or privilege, or patriarchy, or transphobic.
3 out of those 4 words were coined by Cthulhu. Privilege was just appropriated to mean original sin, whereas cis, patriarchy, and transphobic were constructed to mean original sin. Cis just means normal. Transphobic means you don't think humans can change their sex, i.e. you're normal. It's all just original sin for being normal and telling the truth. So if you're going to use these terms as though you're unironically describing something real, you can expect some noticings by people who don't follow the ideology associated with that original sin. We are instructed in the Talmud to be sure to... What? Sorry, mate. Wrong meeting. That's meaningless to us. Yes, we are triggered. We are somewhat taken aback by that line of reasoning, because we're not that thing that you are. Savvy? Capiche? Good.
An especially potent drug of the anti-woke is trans people. I don't really understand why, but when some people start being critical of trans people, they never stop. It's addictive to them.
It's because Cthulhu won't stop transitioning people. That's also a euphemism for butchering people. We don't hate the people, we hate the process. We don't hate college students, we hate what colleges are teaching them. We don't hate children, we hate what's being done to their bodies by quacks with scalpels. We don't hate the victims of Cthulhu, we hate Cthulhu. Is that anything approaching clear?
No matter the topic, they'll bring up trans people. They'll ask you, what is a woman, out of the blue? Trans people are constantly on their minds, obsessive. The most prominent of these people is J.K. Rowling.
Human beings cannot change their sex. Now, in my country, you can get arrested for saying words to that effect. So some people consider it quite an important issue. This cult of gender magic, where you can change a man to a woman just by saying so, has not just conquered the education system, it has conquered the police force. I know you don't think that's a big deal, but some of us do. People can specialize in all kinds of things. There are many channels devoted entirely to baiting those Indian scammers, and they're great. There's one guy whose entire channel is about the evils of TV licensing. He's like uploads a video every day and he's been doing it for 6 years. I know one guy whose entire channel is about James Bond movies. Look at a new one every 5 years or so, but he still finds stuff to talk about regularly, and that's fine. If that's what interests you, by all means, go for it. Go ahead and nerd out with your bad self. Well, some people are particularly concerned about this magical gender cult that's slicing up children's genitals in the name of progress. And they could always find stuff to talk about because there's always something happening. That's why it got kind of boring just making fun of religions. Day in, day out, year after year. Do they mutilate children's genitals? Oh, yes, they do, as a matter of fact. And if someone wants to devote their time to ending the practice of mutilating children's genitals, I'm not going to whine at them for doing so, or for being a bit rude when they do it. I'm certainly not going to defect to the side of the genital mutilators, to the side of the unspeakable horrors, to the side of the thing that should not be. Have I said fuck you yet? I think it's long overdue. Fuck you.
Obsession with trans people seems to be very detrimental to her mental health, to the point in which it's 90% of what she talks about now. But before that, she was a normal person.
No, she was not. She was an insufferable feminist loon, always has been, still is. I suppose that's normal to you. And it always was. So you didn't stop being anti-woke, you never were anti-Cthulhu. There was just a brief period in your life when you thought some people were running into Cthulhu's arms a little too hastily before you proceeded to run enthusiastically into Cthulhu's arms.
What anti-woke critics often tell you is that they're all sick and tired of politics being inserted into everything.
Not politics. Cthulhu! Do you remember what I mean by Cthulhu? You don't, do you? Yeah. It's like a phobia. It's an irrational fear and hatred of the familiar. That's what people don't like being inserted to everything. Yeah, right.
But politics has been a major part of art throughout all of history. What they really mean is that they only want their preferred politics to be portrayed.
They want their culture to be celebrated, not hated and feared. If anyone's euphemizing this irrational fear and hatred by calling it merely political, well, they're making the same mistakes as you by simply not calling it Cthulhu!
The word political just becomes proxy for bigotry. Oh, I don't like politics in my media. Oh, what's politics?
Cthulhu! It's bigotry against your own countrymen. It's cultural implosion. It's the end of the world. It's the harbinger of doom. It's the emblematic avatar of evil. And yes, I concur. I wish people would just call it what it is. Not left-wing politics. It's not even politics. It is the Dark Lord! Great Cthulhu! It is your internal undoing. It's right there behind your blind spot. By all accounts, I should be angrily frustrated that you can't see it. And yes, to some degree I am, but I'm closing in on the final stage. Acceptance. I will never defect to the mind virus of Cthulhu, but I accept that the rest of you will. And I will be eaten last. I will take that one for the team. I'm curious to see what happens. fascinated, even. I've met Kali, Hindu goddess of death, and I'm familiar with the workings of the ethereal void. You do not scare me, Dark One! Come at me, bro! You're not coming for them, you're coming for me. They're just in the way. This is where I kill myself. Really funny if I kill myself. I won't. Pinky swear. But I will leave it there. I think I've made my point. I think I've made my latest offering in my crusade against euphemisms. You all asked me what woke means. I gave you the exact one-word definition, and you still didn't listen. It just didn't go into your brain. It fell into the blind spot. Evidently, the literal definition isn't good enough to get through to people. So I'm using dysphemisms now, whatever it is, cacophonisms. These are demons we're dealing with. They are interstellar pan-dimensional baby-eating lizard people, and I'm sick of not saying it. I'm going above and beyond the Call of Duty with my hyperbolic rhetoric, and I will go deeper until we have defeated Cthulhu. And if you ever do listen to this video, I know exactly what you're going to take away from it. This guy's crazy. You ask him what woke means, and he says it's Cthulhu. There's nowhere near the answer I was looking for. When I ask you what woke means, you're supposed to say it's passionate, excited college kids fighting against racism and sexism. No, this guy's way off. You're not even supposed to call it a bad thing, never mind a really bad thing. This guy won't even try playing the game. What? F-. Boo. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm not playing. I'm never playing. Your game is gay and I hate it. You are Cthulhu. Go fuck yourself. Yours sincerely, Godzilla. Alright, everyone, don't hit like, don't hit subscribe, don't hit the notification bell. None of it does anything. This is a lie. This is all a lie and nothing but the lie. Prove me wrong. I bet you can't. I bet the farm you can't. I bet the farm you can't. You country bumpkin. You cunty bum. I'm out of gas at this point. Just stop now. Merry Christmas! I mean, it happens to be Christmas-ish at the moment. Is this video therefore a Christmas video just because it happened at Christmas? Don't leave a comment below. None of it does anything. None of anything that even does anything even matters anywhere anyway. Cthulhu's going to destroy us all, after all. And perhaps it's foolish of me to even resist. Fair enough. Watch me as I fool myself to death. Sounds like a good way to go. All right, let's fucking go!